Welcome to Equilibrium Echoes, the podcast where we delve into the transformative power of your inner world on your relationships. I'm your host, Alyssa Decker. Join me as we unlock the secrets of emotional equilibrium and dig deep into the tools and insights needed to foster healthier, more fulfilling relationships in ways that feel safe and authentic. Back to Equilibrium Echoes. I'm your host, Alyssa Decker, and today I have with me a very special guest, Shiloh Minor. Shiloh is a love coach for married women, and she likes to say that she helps married women without couples therapy. And when I talked to her, I thought she would be a great fit for this podcast because a lot of what she does is about inner work and your inner narrative and how that affects your relationship. So Shiloh, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. I'm super excited to be here.
Yes, we're thrilled to have you. So tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do and kind of how you got to where you are today.
Absolutely. So as you said, I'm a love coach for married women. So that means I help women who already have the family, already have the husband, but it's not working out the way they wanted. And their husband doesn't want to go to couples therapy. Their husband doesn't want to really participate in the books or the podcasts or the activities to improve the relationship. And the reason I do this is because I was that woman. I had to figure out how to do that in my own marriage when I was going, oh, look, I have everything I wanted and everything I asked for, but the quality of this relationship is so lonely and disconnected that I might lose this. Like I might not be able to stay in this relationship. So I had to figure out, or I chose to figure out, I didn't have to, what I could do to change the energy, to get my needs met, to have a really emotionally connected and loving relationship. And that was something that I hadn't seen much out in the world. Like I had to really dig and collect from all these different sources and experiment with what might work to get to the place we are today, where it's connected, where we communicate, where, you know, it makes sense. It's like, doesn't have to be so complicated, right? And as soon as I figured that out, I just thought, oh my goodness, there has to be so many women who are exactly in my shoes, where you don't even feel like you can complain to anyone because you've got a really good husband and like things look
Yes.
really great on the surface, but it's really isolating because if your husband doesn't want to go to therapy, you often think, well, that's it. And now I don't know what to do. So that's my entire work. It's women whose husbands don't want to go to therapy.
Well, I love it because, like you said, sometimes those women in particular are in this group where they feel like things aren't bad enough to get help, right?
Yeah.
Like you said, it seems like I have a great husband.
Yeah.
Things are great on the surface. He's not screaming at me. Like, you know,
Yeah.
there's this level of it's okay, but it's not great. And I think that keeps women from seeking help to make it great. And I heard a statistic, and I'm not sure of the exact number, but it was something around 85% of the readers of marriage and relationship books are women, because we're the ones typically, not always, but typically looking for a way to fix our relationship without leaving it.
Yes, absolutely. And I love telling people about that statistic because it normalizes the fact that your husband is not reading them. Instead of like, oh, this is so unfair, I'm doing all this and he's not. It's like most men are not interested. And I'll add a little bit to that is that in the men's space, when men are reaching out for help, it's usually when their wife is cheating on them, or it's when she is like, been like, I'm out, like I'm done, right?
Yes.
Which is a really hard point to change a relationship because women sit on that for like 6 years approximately of like, this is not good, I need help, this isn't working. By the time you get to that 6th year, I'll even see situations where the man goes and does the work and she's like, why now? You know, like she can't even receive it. She's just so
Yes.
mad that it took to this point. But that's a very typical thing amongst men's work, that it requires crisis. And so in my work, I help you to make those shifts that don't require crisis, because it can be so hard to know, like, well, if I don't walk out, he's not going to take me seriously. How do I get through to him?
Yeah. So give us some examples, like from your own story, of how this played out and a couple of the things that you learned.
Well, for starters, when I would talk about how I felt, like I'm not happy, I'm not getting what I want in this and that way, I would get like total blank stares. Like I don't get it. Like in it was not landing. I could see it was not landing. I couldn't figure out why it was not landing. I was just like trying to say it in all these different ways to get through, and it just kept not landing. So then there was that point of like, okay, this is not working. I can't just keep saying stuff and keep pushing, I need this, I need this, I need this, because it's not working. So choose something different, like just be practical in that sense. And so when I started doing things in a different way, which was focusing on myself, how I was showing up, how I was feeling, how I was speaking, one of the first things I started with was allowing full space for him to speak. Like if he was talking to me, I stopped like interjecting or like having an opinion about everything or like telling him stuff was wrong. I just like was like, I'm just going to let him talk. And this was because I learned that I was not creating an emotionally safe place for him. Because I was so unhappy, he was just like, I don't want to talk to that person. She's always snarky. She's always like has a problem. And I was snarky. I did always have a problem. But again, it wasn't working. So that was one of the first things I did. And right away, I saw him warm up to me. Right away, he was talking to me more and he was making eye contact because he was kind of just avoiding me in those years. Like he was just like, I'm going to do what I have to do, but I'm going to not seek you out.
So what I hear you saying is you were in this cycle, like this sort of vicious cycle where you were unhappy and trying to communicate that, but that was pushing him further away because he didn't feel safe coming back. And it just, it becomes kind of a self-perpetuating cycle, doesn't it? Like
that's exactly it.
So it takes that first person to be willing to do something different and be the one to break the cycle.
Yes, it's a very humbling and courageous thing to do because you have been crying out for help. You know, I've been asking and bawling my eyes out and we're having these big meltdowns and believing that this can only get better if he does something, right? If he changes, if he steps up. And then like basically tossing that whole narrative in the garbage because it wasn't working and saying, what if there's something that I can do? What if I can take responsibility? What if I can go first? Which is an ego burn. Like it is painful in those first few weeks, especially if you don't have support or you don't see changes right away, which it takes a little while to see the change. Not as long as you think if you're consistent, but you'll just feel like, oh God, this is so unfair. And it is unfair.
Yes. Yes, it feels like you're losing. Like
yes, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah. Yeah. And we don't like that, right? Like we feel like he's the one wronging us. Like why should we make this easier for him? I could see myself thinking that. Why should I make this easier for him? He's not doing the work anyway.
That's right.
So what happened like in your thought process as you were trying to unpack some of this? One of the things that you said that I think is a big deal is that you realized that what you were doing wasn't working. Yeah. And it was time to do something different because first of all, I think we're all guilty of this. Like we keep doing the same thing because we feel like the problem is the other person's and we don't stop to go, wait a minute, this isn't working. Like, what is that saying? Like if you keep doing the same thing, you can expect to keep getting the same results or something. There's some famous, I'm not saying it right, but anyway, that's so true. Right. And yet we keep waiting for the other person to do something. So tell me a little bit about like what was going on in your head in all of this when you were you started thinking, okay, maybe I can do something different and it's going to require some humility and some swallowing of what I would really like to say, right? What was it that like changed in your mindset that got you to the place where you were like, okay, I'm going to give this a shot?
Well, it really came through what I was learning about parenting. Because in parenting, it's much easier to take responsibility because you recognize I have a huge influence. I'm the mother. If I'm criticizing my child, if I'm not, calm around them, if I'm agitated, that's going to make them feel nervous. That's going to make them more agitated. That's going to make them respond. And so it was easier for me to take responsibility as a mother because my child's a little person. I'm an adult. They don't have any choices. They can't go anywhere. But as soon as I started doing that inner work to do with parenting, I realized I'm influential on everyone. It doesn't matter if they're a child or not. The people in my environment respond to me. And so that was a big aha moment from going from the victimized mentality of, if this person doesn't do what I need, I have no recourse, they're in control of everything, it's not fair, they don't listen, to like, oh, actually, I probably have a lot of influence that I'm not even aware of in this situation.
Yes, I think that's so key. And I when I talk to women in my coaching practice, typically they're in very high conflict relationships, like more serious than what you're talking about. But that is something that they really, it's so amazing when they start to grasp that. It's like, I have power here, even though I feel like I don't. Right?
Yeah.
And even if that's the power you have the power to stop engaging or to not respond, like that looks like a lot of different things. It doesn't just look like, I'm going to jump in here and take control and change it. Right? You have power to do things that you don't even think you have power to do, or that you don't even think are powerful, but they really are.
I was going to say, that's exactly it. They don't look powerful from what we code power as in our society. But I had a little mantra I used that reminded me that I was powerful, and it was, I don't have to do anything I don't want to do. Ever.
Yeah.
Ever. And when you think of that power, like literally no one can make you do anything.
Right.
And you experience that with your partner. You're like, I can't make him do anything. You never, like you feel that agitation. And it's because they have that power. They know. They know they don't have to do anything they don't want to do. And you're the one who doesn't know that. So that's why you feel a huge power imbalance. Right. But it's only because you have not claimed your freedom to like truly not do stuff if you don't want to.
And our kids know that, don't they? Like I have 5 of them, and I've always said, like, there are some things that they know I can't make them do. Yeah. I cannot make them eat. Yeah. I cannot make them fall asleep. Like, I cannot make them choose to use the potty. Like,
no.
So they, from a very early age, we know that. But I think sometimes as women, we're conditioned and to give that up, right, in our efforts to take care of everyone.
Yeah. And
that's like a big mindset shift for so many women that is very impactful.
It's that word have to that you can stick with, right? Women will say a lot, I have to do this and I have to do that, or else this and that will happen, right? Yeah. I have to. And I would say, no, you don't have to, but you can choose to for whatever reasons you choose, right? But you don't have to.
Yeah, even the big things. I have to take care of my kids. Well, actually, you don't. Like, they're going to end up in foster care and you may end up in jail, but you don't have to.
That's exactly it. That's what made me realize. I thought of women who had walked away from their kids, like who had just been like, see ya, and moved to Mexico. That is an option.
It is.
Yeah.
Maybe not a recommended one, but no, it's still an option.
Yeah.
So when you changed your conversations with your husband, you started like just listening and not interrupting, giving him a safe space to talk. Like, what happened next?
Well, through all of this, I should say I was doing inner child work, because my inner child was like, this is not fair. When do I get to talk? How come I have to shut up now? Really felt like this was a step backwards, right? She was like, this is a step backwards. You need to stand up and speak up and, have things to say right now. And so I spent every night like listening to her, soothing that little girl and being like, it's okay. We're on a track here. This is what we're choosing to do. No one's making us do this. This is our choice. And so that inner work allowed me to release resentment, release the attitude, release the combativeness. It became easier to be peaceful around my husband, because I was on edge. Like, I was ready for him to say something. I was ready for him to do something. I was ready to like, okay, you're not going to cross me. I'm big, again, because I didn't want to be in this one down position, which I'd seen so many women be in their marriages, that I was very vigilant for that not to happen to me. So again, I had to get that deeper inner power to know that like nothing's going to happen to me that I don't want to happen to me. Like I can take my time with this. I can see what it's like to feel these triggers. I can be more strategic. I can take time with my responses. So I got my inner world grew like crazy. Like I went from feeling very alone and very isolated and very trapped because I'm this mom of these 2 little boys and this husband who doesn't talk to me or like nurture me, to being like, I have this whole life with myself. That is actually pretty nice. And I can be there whenever I'm sad or whenever I'm frustrated, whenever I'm angry. I actually do have someone to talk to all the time. Sounds psycho, but it's amazing. You talk to yourself. You have your own relationship with yourself. And so as I did that, then the next thing was validating him. Being like, hey, I appreciate that you work so hard for us. I appreciate that you're a great dad. And I see that you're always on it, even when you're tired. You know, I notice that you don't complain about the work that has to be done outside and around the house, because I took stock of all the ways I was taking him for granted. Because he wasn't performing in these ways, I was writing off, sorry, this is be audio, because he wasn't performing in the top ways that really were my love languages and really valuable to me. I was then writing off all the acts of service, you know, all the loyalty, all the consistency, the fact that even though I was super pissed, he never threatened to leave. He never like got mad about it. He was just waiting for me to figure it out somehow, right? And so I started to really see him for who he was, instead of just like, what can you do for me?
Yeah, that's really, really critical, isn't it? You mentioned the 5 love languages, and I do see some value in that book, but I also see the downside of it, which is exactly what you just said of,
right.
It's easy to say, well, this is my love language, and if you're not loving me this way, then you don't love me, right?
Yes.
Or you're not doing it right. Mm-hmm. So I don't feel loved. Yeah. And there's so much more to love and relationships and that, and it's really valuable to be able to see what the other person is doing as an expression of love, even if it's maybe not coming in the way that you would prefer. And it's very frustrating when someone's trying to show you love and it's not the way you are telling them to, right? Because you feel, again, like they're not seeing and responding to you and what you're saying.
I think that's a really good point. And I am of the belief that almost everybody has opposite love languages, like that's a function of how we choose our partners, that they're different than us, that we're a good team, but we don't mirror love languages, like as a rule. I've very rarely seen it. And so when we read these love languages in books and go, oh my God, this is never going to work, my husband has opposite love languages from me, it's like, that's normal, that's life. And again, it's because you're a team. You're here to like have a life together and maybe raise kids together, and being different is a really good thing, right? That's helpful for the robustness of your whole, you know, lifestyle. But what I consider to be the number one skill that women need is to expand their capacity to receive love. And if you use the love languages as like confirmation that that's all you get, that this is the only way you can ever receive love, you are limiting your joy, you're limiting your connection, you're limiting love in your life. Because when I look at the acts of service, which I had, you know, previously gone, that's not my thing, like I couldn't care less, and went, wow, this person like loves me so much because this is what they know how to give, and they give it in excess. Like my husband built us a house, built me a greenhouse, built me a sauna, built me a little cabin by the lake, like the man, a garden. Like he's just constantly trying to show me love. And when I learn to be truly touched by that in my heart, guess what? I get all the love languages now. They all count.
Yes.
Right? And I think sometimes we confuse self-worth with being difficult to please. And that's not what we're going for. Like, oh, well, if you can't do these few things I like, I'll never be happy because I'm high worth. It's like, no. A woman who is in love with herself imagines everyone is loving her too. Of course that's love. Of course he's doing it because he loves me. Of course he stays up late to pick up the kids, or, you know, paints the house because he loves me. That's like your paradigm, as opposed to nothing but this means love to me. Do you see the difference?
I do, absolutely. Yeah. Go back to that idea of a woman who loves herself. Like that's really key.
Yeah.
And we get very conflicting messages about that today in society. Yes. Like we're told that is selfish, or that we're supposed to put other people first and all of that. So talk to me a little bit about that.
So in my paradigm, putting yourself first is the most loving thing you can do for your whole family, because it works for you, but then it works for them. And how it works is you're not starving for affection. You're not starving for words of affirmation. You're not starving for validation. I was like that. I was like, this man doesn't tell me I'm beautiful. He must think I'm not. You know, he doesn't say I love you. He must not love me. He doesn't say it. How am I supposed to know it's true? Right? But when I did that work of self-validation and self-love, it was like, I know I'm beautiful and I would love it if you told me. And then every time, and then it's easy for him to tell me because it's not coming from this grasping, like, I'm going to die if you don't tell me. I am unhappy because you won't tell me. It's all your fault that I'm insecure. Like, we often will take those insecurities, those parts where we don't love ourselves, and outsource them to our husbands. Like, well, this is my insecurity. It's your job to fix my insecurity. And it's not. It's never anybody's job to fix your insecurities. What happens when you love yourself is you get more of what you want. That's the formula. The more you like it, the more you get it. The more you have it, the more you get of it. It's seems unfair, but it's either going up or it's going down. So if you have big insecurities and you worry about them and you fixate on stuff, healing that and doing it within yourself will allow you to receive what your husband really believes about you. I can't believe the number of women who can't take compliments from their husbands. Honey, you look beautiful. Oh my God, have you seen me? Like, this outfit's terrible. I've got bags under my eyes. Like, I've gained all this weight. And it's like, you can't even accept that love because you don't believe it's true.
Yeah. Yeah. So what kind of things happened? Like, what were some signs that you got that this was working and that your relationship with your husband was changing when you started doing all of this work?
Well, the first one is that he started making eye contact because I felt like I was like not there. He started being happier was a big one because I had decided, oh, this man is so grumpy and negative. How do I ever live with this person? But he would have good things to say. He would want to talk to me in the morning. He would start sharing things that happened at work and like smiling. And it was, again, not from some explicit things I told him, but because I listened, and it's also because I was receiving what he was giving me and thanking him, showing appreciation. So his whole presence just became much warmer and much kinder, more patient. And then also what happened is after that, I started requesting things because what I realized is I had to restore the emotional safety before I asked for anything anymore. Because before I was only asking. I was never appreciating or I was never noticing what was already there. So he was like tapped out. He was defensive to any requests. So he really wasn't listening. And then so after that happened, I started learning how to ask for things in a different way, in a more light way, in a way that said, I really love getting hugs because it gives me so much energy. I feel much better for the day. I feel connected to you. And that's just from random hugs. That's just from if I'm standing in the kitchen, you give me a hug. That like makes me super happy. Instead of, you never hug me. Why do you never do that? How is it possible that you could not hug your wife? Right? That was coming from insecurity and anger, confusion, right? To like, I'm sure he would do it if he knew how it was important to me. And then he did. And now it's like a big part of our relationship. And you want to talk about love languages. He was non-affectionate, came from non-affectionate family. Everybody says, oh, he's like that. That's his background. And it's like, men can change, and they do change when they feel safe. Not all of them, like you've talked about. When you have super high conflict, sometimes it's different. But if it's more of like a roommate thing, and it's just there's distance between you, there's a lot you can do to heal that.
Yes. Yeah, there really is. I love hearing this. So what was the tipping point where you were like, you started to feel emotionally connected again?
I think that because I was so like worn out and scared and exhausted emotionally, every little win I got was so huge. Like just feeling like it could get better. Or like I was getting traction, like this was not a doomed scenario where I had to just accept that I was going to be in a roommate marriage, made me so happy. It made me so happy every single time. And so what I sometimes say is you're either in a dying marriage or a growing marriage. It's not like there was one point where it was like, okay, now our marriage is good. It was like, oh, it's getting better. Oh, it's getting better. Oh, I can even ask for things in this category, which I haven't before. And I can, we can have these kind of conversations, or I can speak vulnerably about a topic that before would always cause a fight, like about money. We could sit down and have like a long conversation about money, as opposed to it just being like a couple snippy comments and then like, we can't talk about this. It's too heavy. Right. So what I noticed is that it like expanded and expanded. And now today, I still look for ways to expand it, because what I've realized is that women's desire drives the health of marriages. Like if we don't know what we want, it will not work. Like I really believe this. You have to know what you want, so you have to be able to ask for it, and then you can get it, and then you're happy, and then you ask for it, you get it, and then you're happy. And then he's like, oh, my wife is happy. I'm doing a great job. I'm a good husband. I feel good about myself, and I have this beautiful, happy woman in my house, which is like a dream come true and makes me feel great about life. And so what I always tell to women when they make some progress is like, don't stop dreaming. Don't be like, oh, I asked for a lot. I'm just going to like cap it there because I'm afraid of disappointment. Like I don't want to risk having my feelings hurt again. You keep staying in touch with what you want.
Yeah. Yeah, and the way that you're talking about presenting that is so different from what most of us do, because you're not giving a list of demands, right? No. Like, you have to do this, this, and this for me to be happy. It's a totally different approach, especially when you're starting in that place of, I'm already happy in my own skin. Like, I like who I am. Yeah. And if you can do these things for me, even better. It takes that pressure off, that performance pressure, I think that so many men feel.
And it's a really good point. I was just asking some of my audience about this, about how when women tell their husbands they're unhappy and the men kind of look at them with blank stare. Like I've heard this, many, many women have had this experience. And they're like, how can you not say something when your wife has said she's unhappy? And a lot of the men have this conflict in their head of like, well, it's truly not my job to make her happy, because it's impossible for me to make somebody else happy. So what's she really saying? I don't want to get involved in a situation where she's expecting me to keep jumping through hoops to maintain her happiness, because that won't work. I won't have the stamina for it. I won't be able to keep it up. And this does happen in some relationships where the men are more people pleasers, where they try to jump through hoops for their wife. And what happens is it reinforces her idea that her happiness is his responsibility, which prevents her from being truly happy.
Right.
So if you're in a situation where you're not happy in your marriage, it's almost like the perfect fertile ground, because if you can learn to be happy and contented when things aren't better yet, then you maintain that capacity to be happy. And you can, like you said, make requests that are not demands, because you're okay. If you're not okay, it's really hard to present things that way.
Right, right. So I'm really curious, when you got to a place where you were in a much better place with your husband, you decided that you wanted to start coaching women on this. How did that conversation go with your husband? Like, how did he feel about that?
It's so amazing how supportive he's been. Like, again, like when things can change more than you could imagine, because he's a very private person. He's not somebody, like, he doesn't have his social media presence is like a picture of him at 5 years old that he's like hasn't changed in like 25 years, like he's no interest in him being out in front of people. So I told him the idea, and he has this sweet thing where he's always told me that I'm a social genius. Like, since we met, he's like, you're a social genius. You just understand people. So he's like believed in me. And then when I wrote like my first webpage, I was like, I got to make sure this is okay with him, because I'm telling the whole story of how like sad I was and angry and all these things. So I said, look, I need you to read this and give me the okay. And I was so nervous. Like, this is awful. Be like angry and offended. You know what he said? Well, it just sounds like you were kind of sad before. He didn't take it personally. He wasn't upset. He was just like, yeah, okay. And he even took photos with me, which, again, private. He wouldn't have wanted to do that if it wasn't just for me. But one of the really cool things about what I would call healthy men or normal men is they let go of the past really quickly. Like, women can't even understand this, because it's a real job for us to get over our resentments and our disappointments. Like, we never forget just naturally. It's so hard. Whereas, like, my husband, I had the most hilarious experience with him we were like a couple years into things being really good. And I got like a flashback to like one of our worst fights where I had like driven out the house and like big drama scene. And I said, Troy, do you remember that fight where it was so bad that I like drove away? And he goes, that never happened. And I was like, he forgot. He actually didn't believe it happened. And it was like this just mind-blowing experience for me of like, he's so in the present. He has no concern for what happened before. And because things are good now, it's like the end of it. And so that's why when things are bad and you're trying to talk to your husband about the past, they can be so resistant to it because they don't remember it like you do. They didn't have the same emotional experience as you. And to them, it's like, what is the use of talking about the past? So some of the women I work with, it's like 90% of it is processing past hurts because they're like, I do want to be in this relationship, but I don't know how to let this stuff go. Like it is sticking to me.
So how do you let that stuff go? Like, I know there's a whole process and there's a lot of detail, but give us the high level, like,
the concept
what does that
of
look
it.
like? Yeah.
So our resentments are not just what happened. There are beliefs about why it happened. So a big part of it is like opening your perspective to like how he could have done that thing and still loved you or still loved your kids. A lot of it comes from the way that husbands responded to their children when they were triggered. Because as mama bears, it's hard to forgive that one. Mm-hmm. It's like you yelled at my 16-year-old daughter when she needed support. Or, you whatever, had these boundaries that were so hardcore when you could have been flexible with the kids. And men and women will have different perspectives on what is care and what is, the right thing to do. So we work with what are the reasons this could have happened and helping to understand typical masculine mindsets around stuff and basically, again, see him as a whole person as opposed to just like, did he do the right thing in that moment, right? Often he didn't do the right thing. So then it's like, why do you forgive someone when they didn't do the right thing? Because you want to feel better. This is not about letting him off the hook and the unfair stuff and I lost. It's like, you want the freedom. So when we really hook into that power aspect of it again, like, this is really what you want so you can feel good, so you can stay married to this person, enjoy your retirement, engage in a more romantic relationship. So maybe it's worth it to face those pains. Maybe it's worth it to go in and spend some time with why that was so painful. And so instead of, we really try to go away from him validating you in that, because I think a lot of women are thinking that's the ticket. Like, if I could talk to him and he could say, I'm sorry, I was wrong, you're right to be mad, I would feel better. But I can tell you there's women who've had that exact conversation and still don't feel better. Because it doesn't, again, it's the inside job aspect. You think that his behavior will heal all of it, but it comes from such a deep place and from your childhood and all the rest of it that, it's perspective, it's taking time to feel the feelings, and it's making a choice. That would be the high level.
Yeah, that's really good. Dr. Brene Brown, she likes to say when you're in a situation where somebody's doing something that bugs you, she uses the phrase, the story I'm making up right now is.
Right.
And I love, the first time I heard that, I was almost a little offended because I was like, I'm not making up stories. Like, my reality is my reality, right?
Right.
But that really gets to the heart of what you're saying is, we make all these assumptions about what the other person is thinking or feeling or choosing or whatever, and we accept that as fact. And it may not be. Right?
I've heard it, the story I'm telling myself right now. And I would add to that 9 times out of 10 with women, the story I'm telling myself is, if you loved me enough, you wouldn't have done that. And if you loved your kids enough, you wouldn't have done that. And so if it's about him not loving enough, that's really hard to let go of, right? But we go right there. That's our kind of instinctual go-to is like, if you cared, you wouldn't have.
And there's a lot of assumption there too about what love should look like.
Well, exactly.
It goes back to that 5 love languages thing, and if he loved me, he would show love this way. It's all kind of connected, isn't it? Mm-hmm. So if a woman is listening to this and she's really identifying with what you're saying, speak to her for a minute about the hope, right? The light at the end of the tunnel, and how you can help. Like how could she know if she's the right person to come and sit down and work with you?
Right. So if you're in a relationship where you really believe your husband's a good man, you know, he's loyal, he provides, he cares about his kids, and so you don't want to throw him under the bus, but also you're kind of miserable and lonely and you can't figure out how to get over that hump, then you should really talk to me, because these kind of problems are actually much easier to fix than people think. They think, oh, if he wanted to, he would. If he loved me, he wouldn't be so distant. Or he's so wounded from his childhood, he can't figure it out. But it's not like that. Like, I believed all those different narratives that made me think, it's impossible. Can't do it. It's impossible. The truth is, we don't have the relationship skills and they don't have the relationship skills. We love each other. We just don't have the skills. And so when I teach you the skills, which is the mindset, you know, the inner work, the understanding men, the communicating, all of a sudden half your relationship has relationship skills where there was none. And so you act these out and you stay committed to being somebody who operates in these productive ways, and it can't help but influence this man who has never been in a safe relationship, who doesn't know, you know, communication skills. It's going to touch him, and he's going to be like, okay, I want to step up for this woman. She conducts herself with such respect and dignity. I'm going to step up. I want to be the man who, you know, treats her right and supports her right. So I have a thing actually I call connection assessment, which is like, you want to know if you have one of these really high conflict, probably not going to work out relationships, or if you have what I call normal problems that like almost everybody goes through, even though we don't talk about it. You can message me and I can leave a link for that, because you don't really know until you talk to someone with expertise to pull those things apart. You can think it's doomed when it really isn't.
Mm. Yeah. So what does it look like when someone works with you? Is there a consultation process, an application? What does that look like?
So first is the consultation, which, you know, can just be a consultation. I call it my connection assessment because I'm going to go through your whole relationship and I'm going to make sure you're someone who can have success with my programs, because I don't want you to, you know, burn yourself out in a situation that's likely not going to improve. You need to focus your energy in a different direction then. And then after that call, you get to decide, do you want to do my, you know, do-it-yourself digital program, Happily Married Woman, which like outlines the whole thing? Do you want to work one-on-one with me, where I'm going to give you the customized support through that stuff? And I'll work you through my real love method. How do you put yourself first? Why do men typically process, communicate, act so differently than us? You know, how do you communicate these things so they're not always blowing up and turning into a fight? And then my fourth step is called Be His Lover, Not His Mother, which is like, we want chemistry and passion. We don't just want to kind of get along and like not fight. And I find a lot of the relationship advice out there is just generic people getting along, but you want the tension and the sparks, right? So that's where that's kind of the cherry on top that we get to in the process.
Yes, be his lover, not his mother. Oh, that's a big one. Like, so many of us find ourselves like mothering our husbands, which is not helping them either.
No.
Like, I don't think that's really what most men want. I think that's what a lot of men accept.
Yes.
Because that's what they're getting. And there are some benefits to them. But I think they want, at the end of the day, I think most men want the same things that we do, which are intimacy and connection.
Yes. Yes. And that's what I always say. The great thing about the mother paradigm is it's a turnoff for both of you. You don't want him to be a son in your eyes. That's gross and weird and exhausting. And he doesn't want you to be a mother, like scolding and managing and like criticizing. Like, that's unattractive. And so both of you are just like, oh, it's a sigh of relief when you can let go of that role.
Yeah. That's probably a whole other conversation we could have.
It is, yeah.
So you have a download called The 5 Ways You Can Unknowingly Sabotage Your Relationship and What You Can Do About It. So tell us how people can find that and what's inside of that. So
I will put the link in here and you can message me if you can't find it. Feel free to friend me on Facebook and whatever. But that is your primer on all the ways we're actually getting in our own way. Like, we think my husband's not acting right, and then we're disempowered because he won't act right. Well, this is for you if you're like, I'm ready to take accountability because I want to get this thing fixed. Like, I don't care if it's an ego burn. give me it straight, right? And that's how I am. Like, when I want to make changes, I'm ready for like really honest feedback. And so this is the 5 ways that I personally and all the women I've worked with tend to get in the way of the love we want to create. And so it gives you what they are, why we do it, and what you can do instead. And so this is something I wish I had from like teenagehood, because it saves you so much pain if you can operate in more productive ways.
Absolutely. All right, we'll go to Shiloh's website, shilohminor.com. We'll put a specific link to that download in the show notes as well, but connect with her there. All of her social links will be in the podcast notes as well, so that you can connect with her on whatever platform you are on. And Shiloh, thanks so much for joining us. This was a fantastic conversation. I really enjoyed it.
Me too. It was so interesting, and I feel like we could go on for hours.
Oh, I'm sure we could. Maybe we'll have to do a follow-up episode at some point.
That would be awesome.
So, all right. Well, thank you so much for joining us for another episode of Equilibrium Echoes, and I will see you next time.
Thanks for joining me for another episode of Equilibrium Echoes. If you would like to learn more about the podcast, visit www.coachingwithalyssa.com/podcast. And while you're there, book your free consultation and download the preview of my new book, Marriage is Hard and Other Lies I Believed. I'll see you in the next episode.